Today's episode is brought to you by me. So, at the moment, my levels 7 to 8 party of 6 are going through a rather large dungeon that I've created. It has 4 floors currently and is continuing to expand because I'm not done with it yet. And I think that it's going to be a lot of fun. There's a lot of lore to it, and this creature that I have made for the dungeon is definitely to emphasize the history of the place. It is called a corrupted Treant. I imagine that someone out there has already made a corrupted Treant or something, but this is mine and it's special, and I made it. I basically based it around, you know Treants. You've seen Battle of the Two Towers. What's the second Lord of the Rings? The second Lord of the Rings film. And they're there, except this one is corrupted. In what fashion? It's not undead, that's all I know. It just is suddenly a lot more necrotic, you know what I mean? The concept for this thing is somewhat loose, so that if anyone ever asks to another character, in character or something, I can explain it improvised, because there's plenty of ways that this thing makes sense. A little bit of history on why I decided to create this creature in particular. The party are currently going through a dungeon owned by a beholder-esque creature, and they're having a lot of fun with the second floor because it's kind of like a testing facility for each of the 10, like eye ray effects. I think that's pretty neat. So yeah, that's what they're currently going through. In this dungeon's history, it was originally a ruin of ritualistic druid people, the Key now, as they're called, worshippers of Melora. I'm running this campaign in Wildmount because it's the best pirate setting, in my opinion. So yeah, that's where that kind of came from. I had imagined that there were Treants guarding the area initially, but once taken over, were corrupted by, the powerful magics of this beholder-like creature. And therefore, now it is a bit screwed. It's unaligned and just follows some very strict orders assigned to it, and is primarily designed to be encountered with just one, which is how I've put it. I might put, in the last floor, 2 together if I'm feeling rambunctious, because they might know its weaknesses, which I made a creature with weaknesses. I like to give most of the ones that I make weaknesses so that a player can easily exploit them and overall win because they thought of doing something that makes sense. So the corrupted Treant is vulnerable to fire because, fire, tree. They normally burn when they're hit by fire. That's one of the main components of this. I actually have recently started designing some more accurate to CR creatures because recently I'd just been making up the number in my head, but 5e Tools has a great calculator on their website that I've been using recently, depending on how much damage output they have, their resistances and immunities, their health, and any other features that they have, and it takes them all into account and gives you a CR. That's great. This is a CR 10 creature that will be encountered independently and has a weakness, so even if my party were level 5, they would have a decent chance of taking this. That's a lie. No, they wouldn't, because it's CR 10 and it has 237 hit points. And a 16 armor class. 16 armor class is higher than I would normally put it, but that's because I think that it kind of counteracts that with its awful stats overall, and it's very easily manipulated and used, and yeah. So it has 30-foot movement speed, it's pretty lumbering and dumb. 20 strength, because it needs to hit hard. However, 10 dexterity, so if people are throwing fireballs at it, it's gonna fail. If it doesn't, then there's something wrong. A constitution of 18, this was mainly to bump the hit points a lot up. An intelligence of 7, a wisdom of 10, and a charisma of 12. That's one of its weaknesses. All of its mental stats are pretty bad, and it's not actually immune or has advantage on that many status effects that the party could inflict on it. It is, of course, vulnerable to fire, as I mentioned, so that they have ways to play around it and ways to exploit weaknesses. I always try and give enemies weaknesses where I can if I feel like they fit. Also has a few resistances, and I thought if they're a bit, corrupted and weird, what would they be resistant to? The elements that aren't natural. So necrotic, psychic, and radiant. I was thinking of maybe putting force on there, but I decided against it because who the fuck's resistant to force? But yeah, those 3 made sense to me. It's no one in my party's primary damage output are those 3, so should be good. In terms of their conditional immunities, they have 3. Charmed and Frightened, the good old, if you are not a person, then you probably can't be charmed or frightened. And Paralyzed, because it's a tree. Can't exactly be paralyzed. I have decided, however, since it is still a living organism, kind of, because you got, beasts and plants there, because in our world, plants live just the same as this one, except sometimes to bigger extremes. I thought that they could probably still be affected by poison or exhaustion, In terms of their senses, they have dark vision to 120 feet, because, put it simply, they're in a dungeon. They need to be able to see, and the room that they're in is not lit, so therefore, yeah. It can understand deep speech and druidic, but can't speak. Deep speech was brought by the magic of the beholder-like creature, and druidic was brought by its old life. So the party could try and communicate with it if they wish. There's ways to get around this encounter without fighting it. They have a druid in their party, and if they're smart and tact enough and communicate to it in a way that might get them out of the situation, then hell yeah. Still reward XP for that. So it's CR10, as I mentioned as well. I'm like going down the list of how everything on my screen is presenting it to me for the sake of ease. In terms of its features, not like actions or anything, it only has one, and it's Necrotic Touch. So when it's hit with a melee attack, the person that hit them with the melee attack takes 5 necrotic damage. Very simple and effective. Something that I can easily enough manage, and it's the only feature that I need to properly remember that's happening. If I give this thing 3 or 4, I feel like, granted, if I felt like I wanted it to be a bit more of a boss monster, I'd be up for managing that much. But since it's just an errant encounter, I think one feature that screws over the party is enough, in my opinion. It has actions, or 1 even, but can do it twice, because the multi-attack lets it do that. Gets to make 2 slam attacks. If you don't know what to call your attack, call it slam. That's what the PHB does. And this is where this thing gets real nasty. It's pretty durable, but has weaknesses that can be exploited. It can be induced, a lot of status conditions can go on it, and it has no way of mitigating a lot of them. But if it does get a chance to hit with its slam attack, which is a +9 to hit and has a reach of 10 feet, oh, I forgot to mention this thing is a huge creature, because Treant. It does 3d8 + 5 for an average of 18 bludgeoning damage, plus 3d10 necrotic damage to an average of 16. So I believe in total, on average, that's 34 a hit. I feel comfortable doing that. I'm not gonna lie. It is overall likely to hit the party. We have no big AC people in our group. I think the highest AC that's floating around is 18. No, 19. 19 is the highest AC floating around. So on average, it is going to hit. And on average, it's gonna almost half enemy health. I'm fine with that, because the party can mitigate damage, heal damage, cause it to miss with reactions. They can just negate it altogether, etc, etc. They have ways to counter that, and I think dealing almost half their health in a single hit isn't too bad, because it only has 2. So even if something's alive and it hits it twice and they take 2 death save fails or something, they're still going to be good. Maybe. I mean, depends how the initiative went. Let's talk where I put it. In the dungeon, it is a huge creature. I put it in a 20 by 40 room. Not too huge. So that gives it more room to make it so that the party kind of have to get up in his grill, which is where you do not want to be with this corrupted Treant. Treant even. And obviously this is also bad for it, because if the party opens one of the doors to see it, and it's like, I'm gonna come for you, and then they shut it, it's like, oh, well, I can't fit through the door, so alright, bye then. And that's great. If they open it, see it in there, and then they just choose to close it again, they can go back and plan, maybe explore more until they get to the point where they think, oh, it might be there. All right, let's plan. Let's come up with something, because that thing was massive, etc, etc. And it gives them more to work around. A lot of the encounters in the dungeon are less. It's an enemy in a room. It turns around and gets ready to attack. No, the party has currently had a total of 3 encounters within the dungeon that they've been in so far. 1 was a satyr that was imprisoned. 1 was a bodak that did immediately engage them, so that was entirely hostile. And finally, it was a hooked horror just guarding their territory. Optionally, they could have just left it alone, but they chose to fight it because, I don't know, 100 XP each. That's what they get out of that. So yeah, that's kind of what they've been up to so far. And most of the encounters in most of my dungeons that I try and make are not turn around and fight. Or at least I like to think so. It depends on where they are, really. Like in the Yuan-ti dungeon they were in, not that many places or room for like, you know, parley, stuff like that. Not that much room to not fight. But this is just a dungeon. This is a full-on, you know, it has overlords and stuff, and it has all sorts of moving components, and there could just be encounters where they don't have to fight everything. In any case, that is video. God, I hate having to say all this stuff afterwards every time. Do it all. Do the YouTube things. Where you like the video and subscribe, and what else? We have a Discord in the description. You can join that too. Bye-bye. You're just gonna wait for the winter blow over.
What the fuck was that face? Oh no. Give me nightmares.
It's my legitimate laughing face. I'm like the Joker, baby.
I question your sanity sometimes.
No.
That was a lie. I question your sanity all the time. Just don't verbalise it.
Oh. Hey guys, welcome to Magical Tea Party, where my girlfriend makes fun of me and I cry live. I mean, this is...